Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Kevarimchatter podcast. So, on this episode of the podcast, we're going to be joined by Dovi Safier once again, and also once again, after a long time, a long hiatus from the podcast, of Yossel Housman. And after the success of the Live from Prague episode and the good feedback, I did one with Dovi and Yehuda Geber of Jewish History Soundbites. So, I heard Dovi was in town in Lakewood, so this is coming to you live from Lakewood this time. So we decided to get together and do a little bit of a ad hoc podcast over here, especially from Gimel Tammuz. So there's what to talk about. So thank you, Dovi. Thank you, Yossel, for joining me again.
It's a pleasure. I mean, it's not every day you get to be on the air together with Rabbi Yosef Shaul Housman of Mishpacha fame. I think this is his first ever article for Mishpacha, and he had to cover right away. Took me quite a while to get there, so it's it's obviously there's something special in the air over here. So I'm just privileged to be in the same room.
Thank you. I was very honored. Actually, Dovi had a big chelik in this article happening. The backstory was not in plan originally. I really was requested by the people who came along with Reb Dave to come along and have a conversation. To listen to the drushes and to write them up. And it was an amazing experience, and I really picked up a lot of very beautiful experiences along the way. And I jotted them down, and then they asked me if I would do it. And we sent it into Mishpacha, and they felt that it was something that they wanted to put on the cover. And I've been since getting an onslaught of redifus from Dovi and his status and other people. But apparently, I think there was some really beautiful moments there, and people appreciate it. Baruch Hashem.
So to be clear, by the way, I don't know if we clarified. This is from this week's Mishpacha, and it's about Chol Mission Abroad, and it's enduring encounters from Rav Dov Landau's Chizuk mission. And so this has to do with you followed Rav Dov around, or this is because your involvement in Adirei Torah?
It had nothing to do with Adirei Torah. When they called me about the Adirei Torah, I would explain for those who aren't familiar. I did have another opportunity to run the days of the Adirei Torah, meeting where the Rishivas would sit.
Explain if anyone's confused. I was in the day. It had something to do with the fact that Yosef Shaul Housman was running the day.
Also, probably most people know what Adirei Torah is. We just explain what Adirei Torah is.
Do we have like 2 hours there?
In very brief.
It's Gimel Tammuz, right? So you have it's like Kenes HaShluchim. I'm saying what
right. So it's the Gimel Tammuz has two main functions. One of them is the Lubavitch Rebbe's Yartzeit, the other is Reb Shneir Kotler's Yartzeit. So the first Gimel Tammuz has the Kenes HaShluchim, and the second Gimel Tammuz has the Adirei Torah. Adirei Torah is an event that happened last year for the first time. It came on the heels of a big change in the Bismarish Gevaya Koil campaign. They raised the Koil check by a significant amount, and they felt that they wanted to make an event that would commemorate that and celebrate the people dedicating their life to Torah. And that was the event of Adirei Torah. It happened last year. It was a tremendous success, and they felt they wanted to do it again. The day's job, this is really, we're really digressing here, but the day's job really was this, it's probably the biggest event of Rosh Yeshiva and Rabbanim. We're talking about a dais of over 600 seats. And there was many cheshbonos and making sure everyone gets the proper cover, etc. So I was part of a team of 3 people who oversaw the dais, to make sure that it would happen properly.
I should mention Kalman Biederman, obviously, was involved. Was on our Prague trip. Was one of Menachem and I's favorites. He was also involved. Over there. So anytime we can mention Kalman Biederman's name, we mention it.
And anyone who listens to Israeli Bornstein share, Kalman runs the every morning or night, whenever it is. Kalman is running the Zoom, the recordings, everything. So. Yes.
I only know him for a couple of months, but Kalman Biederman is one of the unsung heroes of Klal Yisrael.
He is? He's actually my first cousin.
First of all, everyone is Yossel's cousin. You learn that very quickly. Yossel is related to pretty much everybody.
Is that because Stoliners are related to everyone?
It could be, or it could be Stoliners related to me, and I'm related to everyone. But no, Kalman was actually pretty high ranking. He was very involved there. He was involved in the coordination of several parts there, but also the days. He's a great guy.
So the 2 of you ran the days.
So me, it's still a lot of people. You'll ask. There's probably like it was an entire thing with 3 parts. There was the Rosh Yeshiva, the Rabbanim, and the Rosh Hapur Yeshiva. So that gave us close to 700 people on the dais. And yeah, whatever. It's a conversation of its own.
And this, if anyone doesn't know, this was in the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, where the Flyers and the 76ers play for the big stadium.
People might have seen the article. There was a real concern that the 76ers would be playing that night, and in the end they lost. So Adir Ter continued as it was supposed to.
Right, they got the Philadelphia Rosh Yeshiva instead of the Philadelphia 76ers. I saw Shaul Kamenetsky and everybody stayed there. So they definitely did get the better part of Philadelphia. Baruch Hashem was before the I-95 collapse.
They didn't have Jenny Miller, but
Philadelphia, there's a Jenny Miller connection.
Philadelphia is Jenny Miller. I'm
Right.
saying that's what it is. And the people who went to the caver before, that was part of the whole moment. So obviously it was.
I mean, the continuation of Torah is Jenny Miller, so that's really
Correct.
David Ellen wants to know if there's going to be another Jenny Miller follow-up in next Yom Tov Mishpacha.
Well, so there's a couple of options. Everyone's asking me what the next Yom Tov article is, and let's just digress a little bit because not everyone knows what we're talking about. There's a lot of like insider kind of hack over here. So I do write features. I write a weekly column with Yehuda Gaber called For the Record. This week's is actually a very interesting one about Gedalia Boblik, the editor of Yiddish Tageblatt, who is a fascinating person. He was involved in the colonies in Argentina, and then he came to America, and he pushed the Tageblatt to the right, and he wasn't afraid to take on real issues. So those of you who like to read old Yiddish newspapers, Gedalia Boblik is definitely known to you, and those of you who really know about. He was involved in founding of many organizations. He was a big macher in the Mizrahi, but overall he was one of those people that really tried to fight to keep Orthodoxy alive in America. That's just a weekly For the Record column, which is a 2-page article that I write with Yehuda. And then anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 times a year, depending on the year, I write these longer profiles for Yom Tov, anywhere from 13, 14, 15, 16, 1,000 words. They're constantly growing. So the last one about Jenny Miller created quite a stir, and there's a lot of pressure on me for Sukkot. So people were saying, well, I should just reprint the Jenny Miller article again. I'll read it a second time. But Mr. Hashem, I'm planning on writing a book about her, so I don't want to give away everything. But I think that everyone will be happy with what's coming Sukkot. If I end up writing what I think I'm going to write, I think people will really enjoy.
I would just interject one thing about public. It's a very true point that you mentioned about that he drew the Yiddish Tageblatt to the right. First of all, he said those of us who enjoy reading old Yiddish newspapers. There are very few people I know who actually sit and read the Yiddish newspapers, but we all search it to find information. And the fact is that the newspapers that were more sympathetic to the Orthodox Jewry, people advertised there, people wrote articles there. It was somewhere. There was no Frum newspaper in America, or really anywhere. So
what was the first Frum? Let's go back. We had actually during that Yiddish Shalicht, and it goes back to actually last week's article, right. The 90th yard side of Yossel Rosenblatt, and had Yossel Rosenblatt go bankrupt.
Right?
My doppelganger.
Right. Yossel Rosenblatt, not to be confused with Yossel Housman.
Oh, yes,
Yossel Rosenblatt is, probably the greatest chazan of all time, but he was an emes tzaddik, and we know that Yossel Rosenblatt's wife used to hide all their money, right, in different places, because she knew that everything he got to give away. And one of his projects was this Das Yiddish Licht. There was no proper newspaper disseminating totally from Ashkafas, didn't print on Shabbos, so they decided him together with Rosh Hashanah Mendlovich. Leo Young was involved, Goldstein, the early Agudists in America at that time. A bunch of others, Bernard Drachman used to write in there as well, and actually I have some bound copies of some of the old ones. Fascinating stuff. It was Yiddish and it was English. It was half and half. And in that newspaper, I think it lasted from probably 1923 to 1927 or so, whatever. But they tried to make it a daily, but it was a weekly. But a fascinating newspaper. Really, a lot of interesting things in there. There was one of the controversies over prohibition. I don't know if you guys are aware of this whole thing with the
Rabbis.
when they realized that prohibition was becoming a big problem because of the business, the
Sacramental wine business.
Sacramental wine business. I think Shmario Levin, who said, right, the famous who said the line about how the Rabbanim then used to say Meyayin Yavai Ezri, referring to the Parnasa they made. But it was there that Rosh Feivel once, big Chil Hashem after Chil Hashem came about from the rabbis that were taking advantage of the business, right? That were essentially selling the sacramental wine, in ways that they weren't allowed to. And Rosh Feivel wrote in there an article where he permitted the usage of grape juice for Kiddush, which then was which was kind of a big scandal. And I think the next week he had to walk it back because they basically told him that was the opinion of conservative Judaism. I think Louis Ginsburg wrote a similar tshuva, so Shraga Feivel had to kind of walk it back. And I think that was his introduction to America and the way things work in America. That not everything was so simple.
I don't know for sure, but I think that Louis Ginsburg either alludes to it, either he writes it clearly or he alludes to it, that the reasoning behind his tshuva about that being master grape juice, which ultimately ended up today, but I believe he alludes to this, that one of his reasons is because of the Chil Hashem.
No, that was his main reasoning, right. And I mean in Europe where he came from, I mean especially I could be in Hungary, not Hungary. Maybe they had more money. Guys know I'm not from Hungary, but the Lithuanian Jews used to use raisin wine, right?
So in Hungary naturally grows grapes.
Right, I'm sorry.
So Tokai. So that's why in Hungary they didn't have a problem. Chavetz Chaim, for example, used to make Kiddush on Challah. Just in his son's Sefer, he made Kiddush on Challah, and Shabbos morning he made on mashke. He didn't make on grape juice. They say about they talk about the shear, whatever. They once asked her Mendel Zaks what shear is fair used for grape juice for Kiddush. He said he made it on Challah.
Right, we can go into Chavetz Chaim myths, right? But about the Chavetz Chaim suitcase from Mashiach. They said he used to have a suitcase waiting with Mashiach with a clean frock, right? And someone asked his daughter, the story is true. She says he didn't have a suitcase and he didn't have a second frock, right? But you're right, because I remember that my single visit to Karastir, that's in wine country over there. Go out of the cemetery in Karastir, I was very distracted. Everyone was davening and I'm a little ADD, but I couldn't get over the views from the cemetery out there. It's like you're like Har Zaysim and Svas when it comes to the views. I think number 3 could be Karastir. Really? Not Shaykh, the views.
My friend of mine was telling me, he's like, if you speak to Polish Yidden, they don't really they don't like reminisce whack poetically about the Altaheim, but Hungarians all talk about it. He said he went back to Poland and to Hungary and he understood. He said Poland is a pretty drab place. I mean, it's pretty nice, but it's nothing too exciting. You go to Varsha, it's a really drab.
Krakow's nice.
Krakow's nice. It's quaint and nice. It has like a but it's not such a beautiful thing. Hungary is much nicer country. But yes, it's true. They used to use raisin wine. There was a discussion about it. Like that. Shimon Steinmetz once told me that an interesting thing of
on the main line,
and Fred McDowell.
Mississippi Fred McDowell.
He once told me.
I was trying to say that he's one of the inspirations behind my career. I've said this publicly, and his research and the things that he's brought out. Totally anything I've done is like trying to imitate what he's done in terms of learning how to search newspapers and finding all this little stuff. Before the record column, anyone gets credit for it. It's really best to get some credit for it because he's the one pushing me to do it. But Fred McDowell gets
he paved the way for such a thing. I think also originally when I started like on my research or even publishing, reading online, he used to normally you would write an entire article. You had to write it like then it was Sfarim blog. You had to write it entire. He would just put out a small snippet, something, little background, a little interesting. There was a conversation. It was fascinating. I thought it was very compelling. And what drew me
to this thing was his
his breadth of knowledge in so many different arenas,
and a special affinity for that German S, the F, you know what I'm talking about? He has that, like, he
listen, I'm after you guys, but I remember reading his blog, coming across Shadal, first of all, that's where some of my affinity for Shadal comes from.
She's going to start talking about Shir again, you can't go, you already went, you see,
we're ready to buy the cover already.
A few minutes in, we haven't talked about Shir yet.
Yeah. We haven't talked about Shir, now that I got his inscription.
Now he would buy his cave already, now he has a Xaviad. He's working on it already.
Next week's For the Record.
If anybody wants to send Twitlich, you can send, and he'll go next time he goes.
By the way, there's a brand new biography of Shir, so stay tuned. I hope to do a podcast or two on Shir. No, I did not write it, but I hope to do a podcast or two on Shir. We'll tease that about the book.
When's your turn?
I don't know. I really have to
going to see it?
We ready there? I was with Dovi.
They redid the Matzeh.
That the guy they botched the whole thing, yeah.
Can we do Kevarimchatter for a few minutes? I know this is Kevarimchatter, but I think Kevarimchatter.
And by the way, I'm jumping. It is appropriate. Also, we were talking. It's Gimel Tammuz. We have two famous yard sites today, and then Kevarim. Let's talk about it.
Kevarimchatter. So I'll tell you my Gimel Tammuz story. Is happens to be in past years I've gone to remember that Katinsky in Lawrence, and there's a whole matzah over there. Tonight I happen to be in Lakewood, so I'm not there. I don't know what happens in Lakewood and Gimel Tammuz, but one year I was traveling with my family out west, and we were at a Chabad house, and Gimel Tammuz came out on Shabbos, and after davening, the rabbi asked everyone if they would want Rabbi Kiddush to share what Gimel Tammuz means to them. Everyone got up and said beautiful things about the Rebbe, and I thought about it for a second, and I said, Gimel Tammuz to me it's the yard site of one of the great Gedolim of the last half century, Rav Shneur Kotler, and everyone almost passed out. And I said, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, I want to tell you all the story. And I told them the story about how when Rav Shneur's Kala, right, Rebbetzin Rishel, who was then Rishel Friedman, how she was saved, the whole story about how she was saved during the war, she ended up in Shanghai, and how the Chabad Shliach in Shanghai, Meir Ashkenazi, saved her life, right? I said, and what more appropriate story is there to tell on Gimel Tammuz, right? In a Chabad house, about a Shliach, is a Shliach about Meir Ashkenazi, right? How he saved, right? He saved Rebbetzin Rishel, soon to be Cutler's life, and Yossel could tell the rest of the story. What happens after that, right? And the family connection.
The Rebbe Schneer's son, Rebbe Kiel's brother, Shragi Cutler, is married to a granddaughter of Rameir Ashkenazi. Her maiden name is Cohen, and she's granddaughter of Rameir Ashkenazi.
Somebody who is a regular correspondent, writes a lot of commentary on the For the Record columns. We get letters all the time. Chaim Cohen, is that?
I think it's because his brother.
So we got a lot of very eloquent letters from him. Seems to know a lot. But that was I think people appreciate it. It was a little bit different, but Gimel Tammuz, I'm talking about the influence of the Lubavitch Rebbe, which has never been bigger, right, than it is today, which is incredible. The expansion of Chabad and everywhere you go, and any of the shluchim that listen, especially the ones at Chabad houses that I frequent, I tend to travel a lot, and the ones that I know. So I'm saying hello to all of you. Nobody in specific, and I guess I'll see you all at the Kinnis this year. The breadth, right, and the expansion of Chabad is just incredible. I'd say it's probably unprecedented, right, for in Jewish history, right, what the Lubavitch Rebbe has done in terms of just spreading Yiddishkeit everywhere.
It's true, and I'll tell you something. I'll talk another interesting.
And there's another Shneur Kotler connection, right? The other Shneur Kotler connection is that Shneur Kotler, together with Rav Nosson Bachvogel, right, is the one who really was the one who went Gimel Tammuz, right? He built these Kolim, Lakewood Kolim branches, Lakewood, right, to build Torah in cities across America, Australia, and even across the world. So the Gimel Tammuz fever is in the air. You feel it in any city you go to. Obviously there's wherever there's coke, you find Chabad. But in major cities across America, definitely across North America, and you find these Kolim, which are tremendous, tremendous additions, and many of these cities, the Torah community in these cities, in Toronto, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in Atlanta, and so forth. Really, a lot of it comes from these Kolim.
By the way, you mentioned Reb Nosson. This is a thing people don't know. Reb Nosson was really the one who pushed this very much, and he basically handed the project to Reb Schneier, who took it. Reb Nosson's idea, and there's actually a video of Reb Shlomo saying it. Reb Nosson, he said it was Reb Nosson's idea originally. Reb Nosson was like a bit of a he like by choice, just always stayed in the background, didn't really show his what he was doing. He was people saw him as this mashgiach who walked around, tell people to go learn Musar. He didn't know what he was really up to. He was extremely influential behind the scenes. And one of the things he did was, for example, this. Reb Nosson also, in a very big way, he formed a lot of the future of Lakewood in a very backhanded way, in an understated way. And he like snuck out. He just, Reb Nosson, by the way, for example, talking about yard sets, Reb Nosson's yard set is the same yard set as our Baron. So you don't even notice him on his yard set because it's like dwarfed by our Baron. He figured out a way of his project with the Koilim. He handed to Reb Schneier, and it's known to Reb Schneier, rightfully so. Reb Schneier was the one who continued the legacy. But and then his yard set is like dwarfed by our Baron in a way he wanted it to be behind the scenes, and it stayed that way.
Going back to Reb Nosson, it's interesting because we always have to talk about Jenny Miller. And when I was doing research for Jenny Miller, and I was always under the impression that the Philadelphia Yeshiva, which Nachi is a proud alum, right? I always thought that it was a project of Rav Aaron's. That Rav Aaron sent Shmuel and Dovi Schwartzman out there. And when I asked Shmuel said no. It was really Rav Nosson Wachfeigel who was the one that really pushed it. Rav Aaron went along with it. But it was Rav Nosson who really pushed it together with the Philadelphia Rebbe, Moshe Lifshitz. Yeah. But I'm not going to give away everything in the book right here. This is free. The podcast is free as far as I know. So we have to get some people to buy the book. But maybe I'll come back on.
We're expecting you to come back on.
There's no limit to how often I can come on.
No, you can come on again and again. If everyone likes, listen, there was good feedback the last time we did some sort of chilled, just like hacking. By the way, talking about Rav Schneier, so you're talking about the Koilim, we're not talking about the Shvatim thing, the field expedition. That was Rav Nosson was involved with also. You're talking about Gimel Tammuz. First of all, a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to say like a secret here. I've never been to 770. I've never been to Granada. I know this.
Okay, this thing is over.
This is crazy. Can you believe
Never
that?
been to 770?
Never been there. I know. I'm going to get it.
Just for the library, you should go.
I know. I never went.
You've never been to Iowa?
Never.
Give me 1 second.
I'm from Lakewood.
We got to Shmayo Zions, if you're listening. You got to arrange a tour.
We will come.
Or a Kefek got a tour. Nachi Weinstein's got to get a tour.
Okay, we have a problem.
It's not lahachis. I grew up in Lakewood. First of all, talking about Reb Schneier, my grandfather, Rebbe Kasil Zichron Bracha, was Nifter Sukkot this year. He was the administrator in BMG for many years under Reb Schneier, very, very close to Reb Schneier, Talmud of Reb Aaron. And the Mishpacha piece, when they interviewed me, they wrote that he's a Talmud of Reb Schneier. My parents, by the way, were like, he was a Talmud of Reb Aaron, which I missed it when I was proofreading it because he was a Talmud of when they sent it to me to look it over before, I totally missed it because he was a Talmud of Reb Aaron. And yeah, he was very, very close to Reb Schneier. He was administrator. I mean, Makil was talking about, they all were talking about it, but he was very involved with Yeshiva, ran Yeshiva for many years.
Didn't we have Reb Aaron's chair or something like in the garage?
This episode, some hack with this.
I have to explain this because this connects to the whole Kevarimchatter conversation. Litvaks have very, very little sentimental value.
Oh, you're Chassidish?
Oh, this is a very well kept secret.
People don't see you. They don't see you.
But Litvaks don't care about it. They have no care for sentimental value. For years and years, for example, BMG had Kiva Eger's Pnei Yeshua. It sat on the shelf with everything else.
And Billy had a shelf.
Forget about value. Right.
Just sitting there. Nobody touched the Oitzer.
Reb Aaron's stuff with the Oitzer, with everything else. It was a room called Oitzer. What's it called? The Kizviyad. Oitzer Svarim Nadir. I forgot the name of it. And it was literally just like, it was like the smoking room. Everyone just parked there. There was nothing was kept up. These days it's behind the glass and behind the, they didn't care about these things. For example, they didn't save newspaper clippings. They didn't see them care about these things. Today, anybody who deals with antiques knows a letter, a receipt, a grocery receipt from the Clothes Rebbe is going to sell for 20 times as much as a letter.
Let's stop for a second. Let's stop. You have an entire market, right? Every single one of these auctions you look at, right, sells one of the Rebbe's yarmulke and gargle. Right. What is that? Do you switch gargles every day? At what point do you? How do you know that any the Basayans have a menorah that had six. That,
Which, wait. First of all, I have to tell you a great story.
I'm not endorsing any auction houses. I'm not one of those guys that gets paid by the auction houses to shout out things and whatever. And I don't want to kill any sponsorships for anybody. And they're all. Some of them are very good. Some of them are complete frauds, right? And then
it's the nature of the business.
So wait, first of all, chafetzim, meaning artifacts, are
okay, we call them.
terrible.
Us Litvaks call it game used memorabilia.
So you understand. But it's different, right?
Wait.
We saw Chaim's pants being sold. It was getting for auction.
No, so wait a second, just a moment. There's a tremendous difference between
Svarim and
Kisveyat manuscripts and artifacts.
100%.
Artifacts are almost impossible to really get to the bottom of. I was involved, for example, somebody asked me to help him sell. There's a becher. They have great becher from the Chasam Sofer, and there's great circumstantial evidence, but at the end of the day, you can't pin it down.
Right, the Sefer either says the name, or it has the handwriting, which we can verify. Also, they have a first edition or older Sefer. You know it's that Sefer. You can't fraud it. It was the first edition of Chasam Sofer.
Even film, for example. So you have film. So there's a famous thing, for example, there's a famous thing of Romance film. There's another one I know.
But the Baal Shem Tov's film that are in the YU Museum, right? How do we know the Baal Shem Tov?
Exactly, so they can open it up.
It's only Yisrael Rosh, right?
Right, so they can open up and they can see from the parashiyos, they know his Sefer's Ksav because they have him see. So there were two sides for him, seems the two things. But anyhow, these things are very difficult. But Chafetzim are a disaster. Kisveyad are much more. Now, even Kisveyad, let's talk about Kisveyad a second. If you have a Ksav Yad, right? For example, you have a Ksav, the most rare thing in the world probably is something, a letter written by the Alter Rebbe. He probably wrote very little.
So
right?
We found one.
Yehud Ezra just found one in his Sefer
Ezra
Zakaron.
found
The Harry Epstein.
In the Bremen Archive. I've come across one of them. The one in the Bremen Archive is fascinating. I don't know. I know Yehuda is appearing on your podcast. I don't know if we'll discuss it, but it's a fascinating letter. I found another one in Rabbi Rosenberg's archive. Probably now by that wig, it'll be stolen probably from these places.
But if you find, let's take a good example. If you find a tshuva from the Mishkas Yankiv,
Not so attached to it.
right? If you find the tshuva from the Mishkas Yankiv, right? The first question anybody will ask you is it printed? Is it not printed? If it's printed, you'll sell it for $2,000. If you find a tshuva from the Shin of Eruv, it's going to sell for $20,000. It doesn't matter if it's printed 500 times.
By the way, we talk about Chassid. I just want to get into Safier Chatter for a second. This is like not only my pet peeves, a lot of other people's issues. We have like 4 editions of Bas Ayin come out in 1 week. I know that it's very chashiv, it's a very chashiv person, then have kids, school, the whole ganze, everything, right? Or a Tzofan is not in print, cannot be found for how many decades? The Litvaks don't have a connection to this farm. I don't know what the pshot is. It's wild. It makes no sense. But Hasidim just print again. Like literally within 1 week, one time, there was like 2 editions of Asai.
Can I answer your question?
This is the truth.
No, there's a very simple answer to this question. First of all, Hasidim are much more tichtig. They push to get things done. So they print a tremendous...
Dovi's face right now, by the way.
No, meaning they have these things. They get, for example, I'll give you an example. You know why they're printing so many Basayans? I'll tell you an interesting fact. Back to this one.
No! Come on!
I'll tell you a piece of...
You guys, the Hasidim buy them. Did they learn
There's a company... Let me get to this. Let me explain. There's a company called pertinent, if I remember correctly.
It'd be a very nice job.
Yeah.
Very affordable, beautiful job.
I know who funds it. It's funded by a very, very famous Makubal in Israel who has a tremendous fund, and he funds the thing. And then he funds this thing. I believe that Ezra is involved.
No, Ezra has their own stuff. No, but Ezra is printing their own. Shira's printing their own.
Listen.
4 editions.
What's going on is very simple. Every single Chassidish shul that opens up a shul, they have to get a full list of Chassidish.
Every shtibel, not even shul. Every shtibel.
So they're gonna get. So they're gonna call. They
you need
a fully stocked coffee room. And you need a fully stocked Svarim Alter, right? Yeah. So now in yeshiva thing, first of all, and then we can go to the whole other conversation about the sociology of it. That see them, they build a shul. Yeshivas, it's in a minyan in someone's garage, and then it goes to a caravan somewhere, and it's not even called a shul. It's a minyan. There's no tissues, there's no coffee, there's no anything. So no one buys it. They have to get it together. You have to see.
Were you ever in the Bishop Lawrence? You ever my show?
No, but I saw pictures of it.
Right, you saw it. Sure.
I've seen lots of pictures. I haven't been there either. By the way, I have not been to Lawrence either.
So in our shul we have a real oitzer, a real coffee room. Shout out to Rabari Bergman. Rabari Bergman sponsored the Svarim in our shul. But it's not all Kabbalah and astrology and New Testament. We have Sifrei Law. We have every single sefer
I hope you have Darish Rishayim.
And we're in the middle of it's ongoing. We're building this incredible Svarim collection in the shul, in the Oitzer, and in the shul. So, and we have a real coffee room with one of those, like, you know, the 500-gallon things with hot water, right, and fridge, and fresh milk, and we even have
just one question: when it's on the tinus, do they put a cup on the spigot? You know,
it's a Lakewood thing.
Yeah. I don't know if it happens a lot.
I'm saying
right.
It's pretty good that Chassid knows what tinus is, right? They're saying it's very good. That's impressive, right?
But I want to say I've been in two places when I lived in Toms River and I lived in Manchester, New Jersey, and I lived when I had two shuls that were starting out. And I was in charge of both the Oitzer over there, Oitzer, whatever. The first thing the Litvaks want to get, they want a couple of al Torah, but really, I'm not saying that as a bad thing as Chassidim. It's always, do we have a Shas? We need a Mikras Gedolos. We need a Rambam. We need a Shulchan Aruch. We need a Torah. They're looking for Mishnah Berurah, Chai Adam, or Shulchan.
Right.
But they're always looking for certain things. Maybe today they want the Kevis Halachish, they want they're looking for Chai Adam. They want Iker stuff. They want Alashas. They want the Iker farm Alashas. They're always looking
for example,
it's very different.
I'm saying, what do you
you'll have a few sets of Shulchan Aruch because that's
in a small shtibel. I've been in a small shtibel. That's the one.
Again, depends what we call a small shtibel.
That's the old question that somebody once asked in one of these Chassidish shtibel why they have a shas there. Is that sometimes the Svarim HaKadoshim, they quote Gemara, so they have to check them up to make sure they're true.
By the way,
you're not going to edit that out, right?
No, I'm not. Can we talk about that? Yossel, can you tell me about the Svarim HaKadoshim? I want to get this mysterious, they quote, someone told me the Pshat, Svarim HaKadoshim, and then there's State in Svarim. There's a difference in how it's quoted. Litvak,
give us the Mount Rushmore of Svarim HaKadoshim. What's the Mount Rushmore?
No, so there's a full set. There's like, how many, 50, 60 volumes of Svarim HaKadoshim, you know what I'm talking about? You've never seen them? Somebody printed them in the 60s or something. They printed hundreds of stuff. I can't believe it.
The Red Svarim?
Red Svarim.
Is there a canon of I'm saying, is there
like the Hasidic
Not only
Svarim?
that.
The Hasidic Svarim?
Yes.
Oh, Philly had them. We had them in Philly. When I was
When
I was Gabby's Farm Philly, we took over. They had stuff. They don't have tons. I did not buy. I remember buying.
Very good Oitzer. And back to Jenny Miller. You know the first Shas in Philly came from Jenny Miller, and she donated a lot of her Svarim collection, which she had different Gedolim gave her Svarim, and Rav Shmuel eventually ended up in Shemus because, as I can say, Litvaks are not very sentimental. They're not very sentimental about these things. So this stuff, Nathan Weinstein threw out.
Hold on, I took over the Oitzer there when I was in first year base Medrash. That was the first year base Medrash I took over. Going back 10 years ago, whatever. I was a kid. I was a 19-year-old kid. What do you think? You think I knew? All I knew was it was.
I have a great story for you about Philly and Chassidim.
And we had to overhaul Oitzer, which we did. We overhauled the entire.
I have a great story for you about Philly and Chassidim. Yossel Housman told me that there was a guy selling yarmulkes and tzitzis outside of Philly Besmedrash, and Rebbe walked over on the way into Besmedrash, and he says, "Do you have a regular yarmulke?" He's looking through these old velvet yarmulkes. So Rebbe says, "Do you have a regular yarmulke?" He meant like a matte yarmulke, So the guy's like, "No." He's like, "What do you only have? You only have velvet?" He says, "Yeah." So everybody turns to him and he says, "Why?" So the guy says, "Oh no, no one buys that. Everyone buys this velvet ones." So I was like, "Really?" He opens up the door of this medrash, looks inside, and looks around. And he had never noticed it. He suddenly noticed everyone's wearing velvet yarmulkes. So he turns around and tells Yossel, "Why is everyone wearing Chassidish yarmulkes?" so Yossel says, "Well, I guess the Chassidim won." So Rebellion says, "No, they didn't win. We're in goals by then."
It's very interesting because I actually, right, I always, I think maybe I said this in your last episode, but I always say this whenever I speak, is that on one side I come from Luzhensk, and the other side I come from Vilna, so I love Chassidish Shemaisis, I just don't believe any of them. So I'm a trained skeptic, but I'm also a shtickle, a proud Bel Zechusid also, right? And I do appreciate Chassidish Svarim and a lot of things about Chassidus, but certain things, maybe because I wasn't raised in that environment, in Bar Park or in Williamsburg or in Monroe, or in Carriage Steer, I don't, certain things, they're just a little bit hard for me to understand. So that's why when I have Yossel in my life, he's my chat GPT for Chassidish stuff. And
where do you think I go?
What?
Where do you think I go?
Yeah, you live in Lakewood, it's easier to find, Chassidim.
I think that all these are very good, very valid questions, but really...
Explain to me the whole quorum phenomenon, the whole Schis Yugalani thing.
Okay, so...
When did that start? when did that start? Because we know that it was my grandfather comes from Luzhensk, right? And we know that the Naim Ali Melech is like the OG, right? Obviously, Shum Bar Yochai. But in Europe, right, there was two that I know of that were big ones, right? Were the Ramah, right? Like Weimer, people would go to.
Yeah, that's been for centuries.
Would go to the Ramah, and Sarah Schneer would bring the girls from the Yaakov seminary to go Erev Chodesh. They would walk to the Ramah's kever. They would go daven there. It was like a whole procession.
It was a real
right. And my grandfather, Ryan Meir Safier, told us about how in Luzhensk, and I was there last year. They did a Geber on a trip with Ali Islamwoods, like we like to do. And I went to see my grandfather. Look, first of all, I was amazed. Luzhensk is pretty nice. It's a really nice little town. And I went to see. Right. So I saw his apartment that he lived in. And then, which was literally, a few hundred feet. Everyone knows the survival, the families that survived Luzhensk are a few, but the the Frankels are in Lakewood, and my cousins, right? They survived, and it's because a bunch of them were sent to Siberia, from what I understand. And he told us that he remembers as a kid they would start singing a niggin, and I don't know, maybe you know the niggin, at the beginning of the yard site, and it would continue throughout the entire yard site, straight from all the people that were arriving, all the
a fast niggin?
What?
A fast niggin?
Yeah, I mean, my father's going to kill me there. If he listens, I don't know, because he's told me this a million times, and I always ask him, what's the niggin? And then he reminds me, and then I forget. But those are the two that I know about that were big in Europe before the war. And then there's this lull, like under communism, right?
I think there's two famous Rebbe Melech Nigunim. One is the Neiros Shabbos, whatever that's on. That's one that's attributed to Melech, and the other one is you sing it in Meron. We sing it in Stone. They sing it on the way up to the Har Meron. They sing this niggin. It's interesting. They're saying what you're saying. I'll remind myself. So
I want to say something about the farm. Interesting. When I was in Segulis, that I was cooking on my WhatsApp status about it this year, and I managed stumbled across this. Everyone's very busy. Shaul now, the Segula, the carousel, the whole thing. The OG, or one of the OG Segulis, is the Baal Tzins, the Baal Tzins. His yard side is the same yard side as the Shaul. It's Gimel Ir.
Do it his cave or
No. His school is the Print Farm. But written on the he has the same yard side. And I feel like nobody today gives a hoot about it. There was a tkufa, like he was the Get Makusher, Yossel Housman, etc. And it says on his kever, it says on it, he said, Mishli's album Sasan, it says that he's gonna that says on the kever.
In Yelischus.
Yeah, it does say Yelischus. It says on his kever. Shimshon says it in his farm. He wrote it in his farm. He actually wrote it. No, I'm not going against our child.
Answer the question.
It's interesting that we have like this.
No, so a Rebbe of mine explained this to me, and I think in the best way I've heard it. He said that it could be that some of these things, right? They were maybe they weren't anything major before, but so many people have gone there in recent years that the Koyach Tefillah is there. It's something there now, just because of all the people that poured out their hearts to Hashem over there, and it's Tefillah so went over there. It became a Malkum Kaddish just from that.
It's a very nice thing. I'll tell you a nice word on that story. During the early years and when after the independence war in Israel, when Jerusalem was under the Jordanians, you couldn't go into Yerushalayim for anything. You couldn't go into the old city. Maybe Shmuel Dishon, Rabbi Shmuel Dishon, he was Israeli. He was born in Eretz Yisrael in Yerushalayim, and he married the daughter of Heshkenauer, who was killed in. It's a whole different podcast,
right? Yeah.
Anyhow, so he went to Eretz Yisrael. He had newly married with several kids, and what he did was he realized he was an American citizen, so he signed up to a French tour and went into the old city during the time, and no one went. It's in the 50s. And he went in the 60s, early 60s, and he went to the French tour, and he went to the old city. He was by the Kaisel, he was by Kevarimchatter. When they went into the Har Bayis, he found some terrors not to go. He went to the bathroom, and he skipped that part of the tour, and he was there. And the whole later the Shalim heard about it. He almost caught no way out. And yeah, in Shalim they heard about it afterwards, and everyone was talking about it. Everyone was tumbling. There was a Rebbe in Shalim. His name was the Grozhesker Rebbe.
Who?
The Grozhesker Rebbe.
You just make up with it.
Yeah, no, the Grozhesker, a real Rebbe, and So Melech Grozhesker was a fascinating person. It's really a popular on its own. Melech Grozhesker was a stolen anacle from two sides.
Yeah,
he was a son-in-law.
Yeah?
No, he was a brother-in-law of the Piasetta. And and he was so one of the things that he did. So the Melech, and by the way, this Groshes, his Adam was Harav Yeshua, not from the other events, or whatever Rav Yeshua. Yeah. So they
But Encyclopedia Talmudis. That's Encyclopedia.
Yes,
Encyclopedia
all the
Talmudis.
stories of Yeshua Hutner Shidduchim also. That's a whole different parsha.
Why? Yeah.
Also, Kamenetsky writes about that.
Awesome. He married her, his daughter. And yeah, so his shver, he was a big tzaddik. He was a fascinating person. He wrote a few svarim. He printed some things about stolen memories.
By the way, Nachi's bored. He just opened up a sefer. He's just reading.
I'm not bored. We're talking about Kfar. I remember there's a new sefer that came out recently. The Mechaber sent me a copy. Want maybe do a podcast with Moisam Loy Nefradu. An entire sefer. Beruri Sugis Binyane Mesim. Balacha Van Hoga. The Vos Adivre Chazal. Rabbi Shenu Shenu Gei Achronim.
Is this answered by the reader family?
Let me just finish the story.
Hold on. It's Simon's Vav in Tefillah Eitel Kfarim. And he goes through the whole thing. So we're talking about Kfarim. There's a whole podcast about dead people.
Send a copy of this really best.
Anyhow, they came and told this Groshes Rebbe that Shmuel Dishon had his Alma Groshes Ezekiel went into the old city, or no one went, and he was by the Kevarimchatter, he was by Kevarimchatter, and he was by the Koisel. So the Grosses Rebbe he was a very big teacher person. He worked very interesting. He has comes to this farm. You see a very big depth, and he was like similar to you see the PSS and stuff. So he said Kevarimchatter, that's a zach. He said the Koisel. No. So he said, why? So he told the person who told him, he says, what's the cheshivas of Kevarimchatter? Cheshivas of Kevarimchatter, that's Rachel's kever. He said, what's the cheshivas of Koisel? That's a makom tefillah. He said, if people could go there, it's makom tefillah. If people can't go there now, it's not a makom tefillah now. Interesting. He says, kever is in its own right. It has a value. It says that you can go down. Interesting stuff. A little what you're saying.
Personally, I think that the Koisel it's the only times I've gotten to really daven well at the Koisel was when I went in the middle of the night, because you go there and it becomes either a social scene or it becomes you're harassed, and it's a little bit sad. And Kevarimchatter, for some reason, when I was living in Israel the last couple of years, I was living there. I had a car and I had the opportunity. I drove with Dovi Safier, Meir Safier, of Usher, and went with them. And I saw the way the kavanas they had at Mama Rachel, and it made a roshim on me. These are like things I'll never forget. It's in my life. Mama Rachel, the famous of Chaim Shmulevitz, right? Mama Rachel. But you see especially by Litfox. I don't know. You know the famous the joke with the guy going around collecting money for Kevarimchatter. You know this one? A guy's going around collecting money to refurbish Kevarimchatter and money, and he's going around and in Bar Park, for Kevarimchatter, and the guy gives him $1. He says, Kevarimchatter, this is Mama Rachel. I says, whatever Mama Rachel, give him no $1. He says, Mama Rachel. You know what Mama Rachel was? He says, no. He says, Mama Rachel. This is the Baba from Shaul of Kerestir. Give him $100.
But you know that this thing you saying about David. So I was, when I went to Rosh Hashanah, I once went. I go often. I go almost every year for Rosh Hashanah to stroll to the Rebbe. So I was there one year, and it was erev Rosh Hashanah after, about Chatzos time. Went to Kevarimchatter. I walk inside, I sit down, and I suddenly realized that sitting next to me by a stender is Rabbi Yossel Housman, sitting and saying to him. He was saying it with such regish. It's not. It was totally out of character. And he's saying this. I remember the psukim he was saying. He was saying the psukim of Shamakel Vayis Abor. He says, "Agam yuchal teis lechem amidbar." He was saying it with such a serious. A whole capital to him about Klal Yisrael in the midbar, how they were Vayamer was kale.
It's interesting that you mentioned
Yuchal kale larach shulchan b'midbar. I remember him saying it with such regish. Every time I go back, I just go back to that moment. It was a
when you went to Kevarimchatter. But I will say about the Kaisel Davi that for me it was Shavuos morning when I was there. I was Bacher, and I went Shavuos morning by Basikin. That was my
Baruch. Was really Baruch?
It wasn't a lot.
No, I was much after that. That was in the Sifta when he was lifted. My Rebbe, Meir Rubin, was a Talmud. It was very close.
By the way, there's a sefer from Shlosha Olamos about the Beishalayim of the old days. Chaim Hamburger. You know who he was? So he writes about his father and his grandfather. His grandfather was Reb Moshe Novamester was his name. He was a Talmud of Chassam Sefer, lived in Yerushalayim in Batei Machsa. He writes about him fascinating things. One of the things he writes there is that he said my grandfather never missed a day that he didn't go. He went to the Koisel. He went every single day to the Koisel. My grandfather, he said, I think he lived in Yerushalayim for over a decade more. I think 20 years. He lived in Yerushalayim. He said my grandfather never missed a day he went to the Koisel. He never davened the tefillah there. He would say tefillah there. He said tefillah he davened in a shul. It's interesting. I personally, I can't time there. I feel like I'm timing in the street. Maybe in the
when you go inside, when you go inside,
yeah.
Robinson. I mean, in Wilson's Arch.
it depends on when you're
You
there.
mentioned Romy Soloveitchik. I mentioned Rav David and Meir. The Soloveitchik family, right? In general, they don't go to Kvarim. So I think Kevarimchatter is like the exception. They don't even go.
Right.
They don't go to Kivriyos, right?
No.
They don't go to Kvarim in family. In fact, there was like the cousins, they had like a little bit of tinus on the Rav or Soloveitchik in Boston, that he kind of broke the tradition that they had of not going, because his wife, right, his wife Tanya, that he would go to her kibbutz and say every Erev Shabbos, right, right, and there's a famous story of Soloveitchik, and it shows on an Unav, and he would go himself. He didn't have Gabon, somebody would drive him. He would go privately, walk in there himself. And they say the story, Erev Kippur one year, he was there. It was getting close to his man, and he was leaving, and some family, they were there. Erev Kippur, they wanted to say a Kalmala, they didn't know how to say it. And they see this unassuming man with a beard. They figured he knows how to say a Kalmala. They stopped him, and they asked him, and he said, Rabbi, could we bring you to say the prayer at our grave? And he was really getting close to the Zman. And who knows what they knew when the Zman was, and Soloveitchik didn't really want him, but he did it. He went and he did it. And afterwards, they offered him $20 for his services. He said, shook them off. I heard some Rosh Hashanah. They offered him $100, right? And he said no. And they said, wow, this must be, he's a good person. He doesn't know. And then afterwards, and they're telling people about this. Maybe they saw a Navi or something in the cemetery. They said, no, that's Rav Soloveitchik. That's one of the greatest people of our time. And they were like, they said that this is a special man. I mean,
so this thing, it's very interesting. But you were saying about, so for example, we were going originally to the conversation, which connects to this, is about like the Kvarim thing. So generally speaking, I would say that it's fair to say that Chassidim are much more prolific Kvarim goers than.
The Litvaks have been. We just went on a trip.
I'll tell you something fascinating. For example. So we famously, I remember a friend of mine was ranting when they sent Kubat Yair sent a bunch of Gedolim to the Goyen's cave, or something, like the Goyen writes something about it. It was like he found it hilarious. But anyhow, so they I think they say that they never used to go. Now I will say something interesting. In the Russian area, people didn't go to the Vesach Forest at all. People didn't go. It was first of all
Tisha
B'Av. They stood outside. They didn't go in. They wouldn't go in. People were terrified to go in. And they had messiahs. And for us, for example, in Stalin, people with parents officially do not go into Vesach Forest. Now, my family's has the Israeli tradition, so I don't do it. But for example, Stalin goes to Detroit. Everyone stands outside because people don't have parents.
They don't go inside the Vesach Forest?
They don't go inside. They stand outside and they daven.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dangerous to me in Detroit outside.
No, they go in, but at the beginning there's a whole empty space. But don't go into the Kvarim. So, but for example, so what I found interesting was there's a book by Meir Berlin, not the famous one. There's another one on his father. I don't recall the name.
Meir Berlin. Meir Berlin.
He writes a book
not
about his
People
father.
Jerusalem.
No, the other one. Nam Jerusalem. There's a name for it. It's about his father, and it's I think it's a Hebrew books.
How come that book was never translated into English?
Which one? I have no idea, but it was translated into Hebrew from Evolution.
Correct, but that's like it's a classic.
Classic.
Right.
By the way, you see how he talks about Reb Chaim in there? Malach like him is wild.
The whole book is
It's amazing.
So in this book, it's a short book. He writes a little about the politics with when his father became Rosh Hashiva and the Rav and Volozhin, the politics of the other family members. And he says the interesting things in passing. He says that people had tinus that zugekommen, an Adam instead of an actual blood relative is the Rav and Volozhin. For example, what was that taina? He says when there's a tzara and the Rav goes to daven by the kvorim of Reb Chaim or Bitzela. Well, I don't think Bitzela's I think Bitzela's
Bitzela's not bad.
It's yeah, but he said Reb Chaim. He says when he goes to the daven by Reb Chaim, who is he? Zugekommen and not a blood relative.
You see that in Nitziv. In fact, you see that in Nitziv when he had it, there's a shver sugya and he couldn't come up with terrace or something. He would go down Reb Chaim's cave. Yeah. But that's another example of where you do see it. But it is the Litvish idea of going to Kvarim is definitely it's a fairly modern one. It's a new one. And the Kamenetsky's. I remember during COVID, I got COVID, like, perm time, right in the beginning. It happened, and I was like, I was in the basement after 2 weeks. It was free, and comes up. It was Yakov's yard site, and Mamish, there's nowhere to go. Everything was closed,
Right.
and Stam was like my favorite place to go is the Mount Judah Cemetery. It's the Har Zaysim in America, right? Everyone's buried there, so I figured, right? I got in the car. And I drove there, and I figured that I would call him Shmuel, and I would tell him that I went to your father's cave on your site. So I didn't get through to Shmuel that day, but the next time I saw him, which was I don't know, a couple of months later, probably Shavuos time, I told him about it, and he said, okay. And then I was talking to my dear friend Mordechai Kamenetsky, and telling me about it. He says Kamenetsky's farm. He's like, it's not really a thing. He's like, I don't know how many times Shmuel's gone. Like, it's not. It's not a literature thing.
I have to tell you something you're mentioning now. Roommate Sudberg was just here. He came to the Torah. So I went to visit him for a few minutes. And we were staying, and he starts schmoozing me. So yeah, they told him I'm a stolen. So he says, "Oh, my shver, Rav Shach, there's a yeshiva in Lunenitz, which is a Kalini yeshiva." So there's some famous stories. So I asked him if he shver spoke about it at all. So Roommate Tzvi says he starts laughing. He says he reminded us of a cute story. He said that shver comes out one day, and the Bachar aren't there. He said, "Where's everybody?" He said, "Oh, it's one of the Rebbe's yard site," and the other one went to the yard site. Okay, so finally, when they all came back, Rav Shach said, "Okay, so what? Where was the oil?" He said, "The yard site. There was the yard site." He said, "Was tut man a yard site? What do they do a yard site?" So the Bachar said, "What do you mean? There's a yard site to them." So Rav Shach says, "Oh, I thought you learned Mishnayos." So the Bachar says, "What? You think the Rebbe needs our Mishnayos?" So Rav Shach says, and you're cool. He does need.
I heard from. I don't remember if I heard from. Also, in a recording from Rosh Hashanah or from Rabbi Rakefet, but there's a story about when Dvar Avram was in America. Dvar Avram was very close with Dr. Revel's father back in the day, and Dr. Revel, when Dvar Avram came to America on one of his trips, he brought him to Far Rockaway, which is a resort area. He had the Rishonim Kippur down, but Dr. Revel was very involved in his visit, and there was a story about how he was there. Together with his wife, and they're visiting Dvar Avram, and it came for Zman, he had to go daven mincha, and he said, and he had to go. He says, "Why is this saying Kaddish?" And Dvar Avram says, "All right, you have a guest, whatever. Like you daven, and then you'll." It's probably Myra, because Myra was a Rosh Hashanah. So he says, "You learn a few Mishnayos." So, like. In today's day and age, if you told someone that...
you would told them to skip Kaddish.
Yeah, and learn a few Mishnayos. So when I heard that story, it shocked me, because by us, right, Kaddish is what kept shuls going in America for so many years, and all that. And I did not study this that intensely, but it turns out that in Europe, Kaddish is not what it was, right, in America. And the Rabbanim in America realized that if they made Kaddish Yareg V'Yavar, it was a way for them to keep Minyanim alive.
That's interesting.
And I'm not saying the Kaddish. I'm not trying to say even for a second. Right. But there definitely was. I mean, the Indian of learning Mishnah is definitely on the same level or somewhere in thing as saying Kaddish. And Kaddish is like something that everyone does. And Mishnah is like, okay. But
so I think that to an extent, it's dependent on the areas.
Right.
The Hungarians were Yahar Vayar for these things. I mean, the Alam Shlaba writes how
Kaddish is Mishnah
for all available matters.
No, they're Yahar Vayar for the Ragalach.
No. You have no idea. Alam Shlaba says that when he was in Bucharest, he saw a guy who was hitting Shiva, and he closed his store, sitting Shiva. Shabbos, no Shiva. He opened the store. He said, he writes, Shiva's not right. It's not the Rosh Hashanah, sir. But so these things are very cultural differences.
And today in America, everything gets everything gets mixed together today. Especially when you talk about the Kevarim.
Would be fascinating. I would be fascinated to really go delve into that, to the history of Kaddish and Mishnayos, and see.
For example, the Ramos says that only one person says Kaddish. I heard
that he was at some point there was a lot of tzaras and then they changed it. I
No,
don't
this
know.
turned into this. I know that in Europe, in many of the shuls in certain countries, where they would give the richest person paid for the covet of saying Kaddish, right, and everyone else wasn't allowed to say Kaddish, and this turned into a source of hatred,
Angst,
right?
But your Rosh Hashanah talks about Dami Filama, not Kaddish, and he talks about that it's you have Mamash Amaratz and they slur the words, they can't even say the words, and he would be mevatel if he was able to mevatel it. He writes because
It's a very it beers really
Only one person on this podcast is Rabbi Yossel Housman. We're just guys.
So
if there's anyone's gonna say these guys are saying
Mishpacha put me our apostrophe. I got the rev in your
if you write for Ami, everyone gets rabbi. So I'm just saying is that the next. I'm just telling
They'll
you.
be throwing some shade over here.
What?
No, nothing.
No,
I'm
he's
just
saying that if I stick to mishpacha, I have something on the I have something to offer.
No, you could be the rabbi. I'm saying there's not as many rabbis, right? For mishpacha.
Anyways, Rabbi Yosef Shaul Housman, is Yossel Housman Yeshevov, So okay, listen, we were. It is farm chatter. We didn't mention a lot of farm, but we try. This worked the last time. A little different when we were in Prague, Dovi, me and Yehuda, and this is a little different. So, but it was.
Is this gonna ruin your reputation, like with academics, like you're having like clowns like me on the podcast? And,
I got very good feedback last time. Why can't we have some lighthearted banter besides for having academics?
Forum for lighthearted? No, okay.
No, it's not. We're not making jokes here. It doesn't have to be a stuffy podcast. There's no Indian that it has to be. We have some academics, some serious things. We're doing a series now on Spanish Jewry. It's a very serious, kind of. I don't want to say it. Trying to think of the right. Just use the word serious, but then there's something lighthearted. We're talking about a lot of contemporary issues, so to speak. Pertinent topics. Exactly. Things that are Nagela might say. Anyways, everyone should, if this airs now, everyone should read the Mishpacha piece from Rabbi Yosef Shaul Housman, and of course, Davi's off the record.
For the record.
For the record. See, I said off
This
the
is
record.
off the
No,
record.
off the record is that's the thing with the music in the back of Mishpacha was off the record.
I don't know.
I just made that up.
But a lot of people confuse it. It's the same people that
You write an Ami, by the way?
Right.
Or is Man
It's
magazine?
the same. Right.
Where do you write?
My wife writes in this, right? The guy says my wife reads your column in here, whatever. But he doesn't like Mishpacha because they always have Trump on the cover, right? He confuses that whole thing. But it's very complicated to understand the difference between all the difference from publications.
I still get emails for the piece from Pesach. I got emails that many people emails or WhatsApps. I really enjoyed your Ami piece. Even got a guy saying he loved the piece of me in the Zman magazine.
So I want to put it on the record. Not a single one of these people actually think you wrote in the and I did an article about you in the Ami. It's all this game of people that they pretend not to read these, not to understand the difference in these magazines, which they hurve over every Shabbos and they read cover to cover, right? I'm not saying everyone, but the people who play this game of Ami, Mishpacha, Zman, Bina,
my family,
whatever, right? I grad, my wife, or Everton told me about it, or whatever.
Asking for a friend, right?
Right, happens to be the ones who have no problem coming over and me telling me, okay, I enjoyed your article. I like the Chashava Rosh Yeshiva, right? The famous line from Saul Lieberman. Somebody once asked him about, do you have problems, because you're in JTS, right? And, whatever, because people associate you with the conservative movement. And he says it's the Gedolim I'm okay with. It's the Ketanim that I have a problem with, right? So it's okay. You can admit that you read Mishpacha. You can admit you read Ami, whatever you like to read. But it's that joke is it's getting a little bit tired.
I do feel bad though because people were not going to be able to take the mishpacha into the bathroom this week because there's a couple of things in Torah. I'll tell you a cute story. When me and Achi know each other from Camp Aachen. So Rabbi Daniel Neustadt used to do a Q&A in Halacha between Kiddush and the Suda Shabbos morning.
No, I thought it was. I had it, but when I was a camper, we had it between Mincha and after Shalosh Shudas.
So for the Bachram, it was in the morning, and so this is, and I think I'll end with that. So he was asking questions, he was answering questions. So the man who ran it, Rabbi Cohen, Rabbi Aaron Cohen, asked, "Is there an eitzah with all the shameless? It's just terrible. You have piles and stuff. What do you do?" So it costs so much money. So Rabbi Neustadt said that he said that there's a letter from the Chavetz Chaim and the Avnei Nezer has a tshuva about it, that if you miyachet something, you print something, it doesn't have a din of written actually, because it's only hazmona. If you actually read from it, then it becomes haley. So he says if no one ever read it,
then you could really technically, it's Zavchi of Gniza. He said an art scroll, the old svarim that no one ever used, they shred. So he said, then my brother raised his hand and asked a question. If you're allowed to take a newspaper that has halachic discussions in it into the bathroom, Rabbi Neustadt writes a piece, halachic discussions, in the Ated. So Rabbi Neustadt said, no, you can't. So he said, what's if no one read it?
And on that note, we should end. So anyways, David, like you said, more of a lighthearted banter, like a live from Lakewood type of thing. We'll have to think of a good name. But anyways,
Kevarimchatter.
wasn't enough about Kevarim. We're doing Kevarim chatter. But anyways, thank you everyone for listening. And email me if you don't like it. Say it's too lighthearted. We need to have more serious conversations on Kevarim chatter. Okay,
or just skip the podcast to the next one.
Exactly, that's what I think.
If you prefer something really heavy and dense, you can move forward or backward. You should.
There's plenty of dense things. Baruch Hashem on Safier and Yossel, we'll find something else. Anyways, thank you guys. Thank you, Dovi. Thank you, Yossel, for joining me. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.